in celebration for hitting our next YouTube milestone, we have another contest for you all. And this contest, you're going to get your own demonology art print with diagrams of all the different kinds of demons. Now you'll be asking, what use is that to me? I don't want to summon a demon. Well, of course you don't. Demons are terrible. But with this, you can identify what types of demons are showing up, and that is handy. Now, if you are a backer of our original Planet Apocalypse game, you may already have one of these. What would you do with another one? Well, you might have a friend who needs to know what his demons are like, or, maybe just there's a reason to have two. So anyway, this is our item that we're sending out, and the way to get it is you comment in this comment section and tell them in one sentence or two sentences at the most what you are going to do with the demonology print. So what I'm going to talk about is how I actually came to become a designer. Now, if you want to know about my early start in role-playing games as a fan, look at this video. This is how I came to design my first full game, Call of Cthulhu. Now, I've loved horror my whole life. Games too, you understand. To see how I got into horror, check out this video. If you want to watch it before you finish this one, go ahead, I'll wait right here. You back? Okay. So, in the late 1970s, my friend Steve Marsh encouraged me to design a horror-oriented role-playing game. There were literally 0 such games on the market. Now, I didn't think it would get published. I didn't expect to publish it. I was just a fan. I was designing the game for me and my friends to play. Steve suggested that we call it American Gothic, so I did. One of the cool things I look forward to creating in this game is that I wanted to include shoutouts to Lovecraft because I loved his work so much. But Lovecraft at the time was like shockingly obscure, so it was just like my secret in-joke, so to speak, that I had Lovecraft. Now, near this same time, Steve Marsh encouraged me to write to Greg Stafford, the owner of Chaosium. I had several of the games. I liked them, so I did. And then I also sent along some monsters I created for use in his RuneQuest game system. Greg asked me if I could do a whole book of monsters. Yep, so I did. Here it is, the first game product I ever wrote. So one of the most awesome things about this book is that the name RuneQuest itself is misspelled right on the cover. That's what role-playing was like back in the day. Another awesome thing, though, is that I had a section of it for Lovecraft monsters. It had Shoggoths and Deep Ones and things like that. I loved those guys. So later on, I wrote up some cults for RuneQuest. This role-playing game was based around cults. They got published too. Then I felt I was kind of like one of Chaosium's main freelancers, and I had an idea for something more ambitious. I wanted to write a whole world to adventure in based on Lovecraft's Dreamlands, but using the RuneQuest gaming system that I loved. I figured Dreamlands is kind of a heroic fantasy world. I mean, there's swords and monsters, so it would work in RuneQuest as an alternate place to play. I told Greg about my great idea, and he turned me down flat. Why? Well, because Chaosium had already bought the license to all Lovecraft's works. And they had already hired someone to do a full-on role-playing game about Lovecraft set in the modern world. It was going to be named Dark Worlds. By the way, if you're wondering how we bought the rights to Lovecraft with his public domain, this was 40 years ago. He wasn't as much public domain then as he is now. But so Greg says we're going to do a Lovecraft game. I said, whoa, a Lovecraft game. I freaked out. I bombarded Greg with questions and suggestions. Can I help in any way? Can I edit it? Can I see it at least to play test it? Well, Greg called me back and he said he had decided not to let the original writer finish designing the game. Instead, he was handing the whole thing over to me. I was flabbergasted. I said, well, can I get whatever the original guy did for a start? Remember, I'd never done a game. Greg said, yeah, I'll send it. But he never did. Eventually, it turned out that all the original author had given Greg was a 1 to 100 table of spooky sounds for the Dungeon Master to generate. But like I said, I was never sent into even that. I think I saw it like 5 years later, finally. Later, I learned that they actually gave the Lovecraft project to me because I was a big Lovecraft fan and I'd never missed a deadline. So good for me, I guess. It took me a year to write the game. This is what I wrote it on, a Selectric typewriter. I was pretty happy to have it too. We'd bought it so my wife could use it to earn some money for some side jobs. I was a full-time student. Now this is back in the day when most people didn't know how to type yet because we weren't all on computers. No one was on a computer, you know. But I knew how to type, so thank you, Dad, for making me take that typing class in 9th grade. That's been really useful. I got stuck twice while I was writing the Call of Cthulhu game. First was when I couldn't figure out how to make monsters scary. Now, in Lovecraft stories, people would faint dead away, they'd go hysterical, or they'd go insane from seeing the bad monsters. I wasn't sure how to create this effect. It stopped me cold for a month or more. Now, excuse me, don't worry, it's not the Rona. I bought a copy of the Sorcerer's Apprentice magazine. It was mostly aimed at tunnels and trolls, but it had other stuff. Anyway, one article in it by the Raman brothers had the idea for willpower, a new stat. It was rolled on 3 dice, like all the other stats. Everything was 3d6, right? But you had to take a will check if you saw something scary. And if you failed the roll really bad, then your will would permanently decrease. This idea hit my head like an insect from Shagai. This is what I needed. I changed it quite a bit, though. I called it sanity. Instead of a regular stat you rolled for, I had it start at 5 times your power stat. It was like not a characteristic, but a statistic, as we called it. So it had, actually, in fact, it had a range of 15 to 90. I went fully into designing this stat. It changed the whole look of the game because I set it up so over time, your sanity would get weaker and weaker till you go permanently insane. Plus, if you lost a bunch at once, you had temporary effects. But you'd lose control of your hero. In retrospect, this was actually pretty groundbreaking. I mean, every other role-playing game had your guys get better and better over time. I mean, the cycle is kill monsters, get experience and loot, level up, kill bigger monsters, rinse and repeat, keep cycling up. This was a compelling idea. It's still used today. It's no wonder most games followed and still follow this. But my game did not. Your guy, over time, got worse. Not only that, but the most important skill in the game, which was your Cthulhu mythos lore, permanently capped how high your sanity could even go. So the more you learned about the horrors, not only your actual sanity, but your potential sanity suffered. This seemed really Lovecraftian to me, just seemed to fit. And I was designing the game not with a mind of what would be the coolest thing to play, but I want to make this just like Lovecraft. Well, eventually the time came for me to test my exciting new sanity idea. So I took the game to some friends. This was when I was going to school in Davis, California, and we tried it out. We were playing the haunting scenario, which is still in every copy of Call of Cthulhu. So this is literally the very first adventure played using sanity, and it's probably the most played scenario of all time. You can get it in your copy of Call of Cthulhu today, the Corbett House. Anyway, I sat down with the players, and they had found this old moldy book, and I told them, it has a spell in it that summons a malign creature from beyond. And they go, well, this must be what's haunting the house. Now, spoiler alert, it wasn't, but they wanted to use the spell. So they got together, and I said, well, you got to find like black candles and like a dead black cat or something. I don't know. I made up some stuff. So they got the stuff together, went to the basement of the house, and they started casting the spell. And I said, you hear a scraping noise in the air, and a portal seems to come forward, and something's emerging through. And suddenly, the players did something unexpected. One of the players said, I'm going to cover my face, my eyes. Another player said, I'm running upstairs. Another said, I'm turning around and going to the corner. They didn't want to see the monster because of the sanity rules. Now, up to this moment, the way I thought the sanity rules would work is that it would be just one more weapon that the monsters could use to hurt the players. Like another spell or another effect. It's just like, and they also do this. I hadn't realized that it would actually change player behavior. Now, I'm not saying the players were actually scared of my monster. It was just a dimensional shambler. But they had their characters act like they were afraid. They acted Lovecraftianly, and I knew I was onto something with this sanity. Because if it made players act afraid, this is going to have effect on the players' minds, the players' behavior, everything about the game. And I knew that this was going to be something that would be really useful. And that's the story of sanity. The other time I got stumped is because I wasn't sure how to do the Great Old Ones and the Outer Gods. I mean, obviously, they're beyond human comprehension. So first I designed them like great big monsters that you couldn't, that would be really tough. Sort of like the way it was done in D&D's Deities and Demigods. Then I said, that's dumb. You can't just shoot Cthulhu. So I redid them as an environmental effect. Then I sent both copies into Chaosium. And then Chaosium published both versions in the original Call of Cthulhu. So there's both the giant monster type and there's the environmental effect. So it's kind of like, sorry about that. Anyway, over time, I decided the environmental effect was the way to go. So in fact, I've recently released, well, not that recently now, but there's the Sandy Petersen Cthulhu Mythos for Pathfinder and for D&D 5e. And these have the creatures described as, not the creatures, the gods and elder gods and stuff described as environmental effects that grow up over time. And this is actually my ideal way to portray these things. You can still do stuff to get rid of them, but it's an interesting thing. So I recommend that you check out Sandy Petersen's Cthulhu Mythos if you're curious about it. Check out Call of Cthulhu if you're curious about it. And now I've done it. So if you want more interesting facts about the early days of Call of Cthulhu, you could also check out this video. Thanks.